Heat fans are in shambles as the team continues to struggle with inconsistency. Will Miami even make the playoffs? Has Jimmy Butler given up? And as this is the end, where does the team go from here? Jeremy Taché joins us to answer 5 burning questions on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, NBA media member David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. To post your job for free, terms and conditions apply. Got a fun show for you today. We are hitting 5 burning questions with Jeremy Taché of Bally Sports and the Dan Batard Show with Stugotz. And I got to say, Jeremy, great friend of the show, a fellow UCF alum. Go Knights.
Go Knights, charge on.
Did you get any of the Travis Scott stuff?
No, I wanted it so bad too. No. I felt like, look, there are not a whole lot of us.
You're losing your audience here. You're losing
nope,
your audience.
Just give me 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds.
Just do that.
Just 10
don't
seconds.
know who Travis Scott is.
Just there's not that
I know who Travis Scott is. I don't care about UCF, nor do I want to start off the show talking about Golden Knights or whatever they're called.
Okay, first of all, it's just the Knights. Drop the Golden. It makes it cleaner.
20 years ago.
Second of all, I just figure there's not that many of us in the sports media space who are wholeheartedly representing UCF, and so in turn, we should have been gifted some of that stuff.
We should have.
That's all I'm saying. Let us be your influencers out in the wild.
UCF, send some stuff out. That's how it works. Get with the program here. I also did have the little, is it worth me trying to buy this stuff? Because I'm not sure I could pull this off.
Yep.
So there was a little bit
of why I would wear it for free.
Right, that's right. Maybe for free. We are recording this on Monday afternoon, after obviously the disappointing loss to the Pacers on Sunday. Jeremy, how are you feeling as we record this compared to how you felt maybe Sunday afternoon before that game started?
Deflated. Look, do I think that ultimately this is the end of the world, burn it all down in a singular game? No. I don't actually feel that differently about this team than I did going into it in terms of what their potential is. On the same token, you just made it so much harder on yourself. And to watch these last 3 games basically sum up the entire season. You lose a big one at home that was just all of these runs, and you look like literally 2 different teams within a game. Then you go on the road on a second night of back-to-back and beat a team that's been playing well. And then in what's, one of the biggest games of your season, you come out flat, but ultimately do all of the things that show you why this team has the potential to scare people. So, frustrating ending, certainly sad to, not end up with the result you want, but not that different than what it was going into it.
That's fair. We kind of made a similar point. I know, David, you mentioned that that Pacers game was sort of a microcosm of the season as well. So look, that's how it is. It's where it is. You mentioned them not making it easy. That's essentially what Jimmy Butler said after the game. We will get to that sound later on. Also talk about the Heat's playoff chances here in a second and what happens if they do flame out early in the playoffs. But let's just jump right in to 5 burning questions.
He's on fire!
Question number 1, Jeremy and David. Will the Heat even make the playoffs? Because as we're sitting here talking, they're the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. We have a night off from the NBA on Monday night. If the play-in started now, they would be on the road in the 7-8 game in Philadelphia against the Sixers. If they lose that game, they would play the winner of the 9-10 game between the Hawks and the Bulls. We're not talking about it being a guarantee that the Heat even make the postseason. So the first question, it's a good place to start. Jeremy, do the Heat make the playoffs?
Yes. I'd be really, really, really surprised if this team did not make the postseason whatsoever and they lost both of those play-in games. For that matter, this team's been better on the road than they've been at home. So maybe going to Philadelphia is a better thing than even hosting that game. Look, Do I think that this team is flawless? Obviously, absolutely not. Like, there are plenty of things that you saw in the last 3-game sample that show you why they are where they are. On the same token, yeah, I think that they'll win one of those playoff games. If not the first, they'll win the second, or play-in games rather.
What do you think, David?
Yeah, I have to agree. I don't see much chance of them losing all those games. But, at the same time, even as we're answering this, like, they were a few minutes away from having lost all these games. And I was texting you earlier, like, the feel of this part of the season is so eerily similar to what it was last year, where people were turning on the team and there was no chance. And they were so upset and deflated and tired of watching this team struggle with inconsistency. And then the magical playoff run kind of erases that. And here we are an almost exact year later with the same questions that we had last year. So I don't know. I like Jeremy. I think that there's a very good chance that they'll win at least enough of these games to be able to get into the playoffs. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did it either.
Yeah, I thought that the Heat were getting the 6th seed until the final buzzer of that Pacers game. I had so much hope that they were going to get this guaranteed playoff berth. That said, I have zero hope that they get the 6th seed now. Basketball Reference has it as a 14% chance. Playoff Status has it as a 10% chance. I'm out. It ain't happening. So at this point, yeah, they're going to have to make it through the play-in game. I still think they end up hosting the 7-8 game. Still think that that's what ends up happening. Again, maybe I'm delusional. Who knows? I guess I was delusional when it came to the 6th seed, so I'm not sure I'm the best person to come to in terms of if we're looking for betting advice of where the Heat are going to end up in the playoffs in terms of seeding. But I still think they end up hosting the game. I think, Jeremy, I agree with you. I don't know how much it matters, although I would prefer to make Joel Embiid get on a plane and come here.
For sure.
I would prefer that. But to your point, like, it's not to say that they couldn't win in Philadelphia either. I think they make it. I don't know how they make it. I don't know if it's the 7th seed, all right, and I don't know if they have to lose that first game and make it like they did last year as the 8th seed. I would really like the new goal now that the 6th seed is pretty much off the table.
It's 7.
Please avoid the Boston Celtics in the first round at all costs, because I don't know that that's going to be the series that maybe some Heat fans think it's going to be.
No, I think a lot of Heat fans are leaning towards doing that just so they can put this team out of its misery. Like, go in there, go to take on this really good Boston
We're
team.
just taking the Heat out back?
Just to take it out. No, that's crazy.
I think a lot of fans
the Boston
want
Bullet.
If they get into the play, if they somehow escape and get in the A seats, like, please let us face Boston just so they can finally put this team to bed.
Cowards.
That would be the lamest way to end this whole era. Is the team that we like the arch rivals, these two teams that meet so many times in the Eastern Conference Finals. It would just be a bullet to the head by that team.
A sweep, even.
And the argument I would make, by the way, if you want to, because I can always find a way to have the positive spin if you want to. Would you not rather get Boston after they've basically lollygagged through the back half of the season because they've had so much room to play around and they're doing this, we're going to switch late and try new things, get them in that first series and see if you can kind of catch them off guard? I know that's not how it works, but if you're trying to beat Boston,
attempt. I appreciate,
you know what I mean?
Like, I would rather that.
I'd rather play Milwaukee. That's not me saying. That's not me
push
saying
it
I
off
want
as long
Boston.
as possible. Maybe somebody else upsets them in the first or second round, and you catch a break there. Or Kristaps Porzingis gets hurt. The more time you allow for KP to get hurt or another injury to take place.
That's not a bad way of looking at it, though. If you can somehow catch them off guard and steal game one,
that's all I'm saying.
That creeping voice of a little bit of doubt there.
I mean, that would knock them off. It would make them wobble. If
fragile
the
psyche.
Heat were to, if the Heat were to go into Boston and win game one, it would make them wobble. I'm just not counting. Give me the Bucks. I would prefer the Bucks.
Of course, because they're a disaster.
Doc Rivers at the end of that Sunday night game after they blew it to the Knicks, and then apparently, according to Shams and the Milwaukee Bucks writer for the Athletic, and I apologize, I forget the name here. Eric Neem, I think reported that they had like a team meeting on Saturday, and then after that team meeting, were all 9 key rotation players, which is basically the weirdest team meeting ever. It's either put the 2 stars, like the 3 stars, I guess, for them, where it'd be like Giannis, Dame, and Chris Middleton in a room, have them talk it through. But to extend it to 9 players, you're basically just leaving out five or
guys
six
that don't
players.
play.
You're like, sorry, Thanasis, but your opinion clearly does not matter here. We'd actually rather hear from Bobby Portis right now. Is
That
the
confident?
weird?
Did he
It's
make
like the most
nine-man
Doc
rotation?
Riversy team meeting that there is. And hey, guess what? It didn't work. They had it on Saturday, and then they blew a game on Sunday. That said, we are going to continue along with our 5 burning questions, including: has Jimmy Butler just straight given up on this team? Has he let go of the rope? We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I've been there where you have to try and find somebody to fill a role. It's not easy. You have to sort through all the resumes, wonder whether or not you should bring people in for interviews, wonder whether or not they have the right qualifications. LinkedIn handles all of that for you. It's not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and they do all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within just 24 hours. Get it done within a day. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire someone, and that's why they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should be next. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or a free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Continuing along here with 5 burning questions. Before we get to the next question, I want to play some sound from Jimmy Butler after that Pacers game.
How do you sort of approach these last 4 games knowing where the standings are right now?
It's the same. Just win. Win as many as you can. It's been that way all year long. It's not going to change. If we end up in the play-in, we end up in the play-in. We all have a job to do anyways. But like that's how we've always played. We've never made it easy on ourselves. Why make it easy now? Man, winning out or not, you just always got to keep that same energy. You always got to smile. You always got to realize that it's never as bad as it always seems. And we get to hoop for a living, man. Everybody should be smiling. Everybody should be having fun. And everybody should be enjoying not only playing basketball, but being around one another. Whenever you realize that basketball is a game, no matter if it put food on the table or how important it is to you, you just got to have fun and you got to smile, man. So as long as we do that, I know that the wins will come.
If only it was that simple. David, I'm going to throw to you first here because I texted you this clip and I said, it sounds like Jimmy Butler's given up. Do you agree with me?
He's on fire!
Now that I've heard the entirety of the clip, on the one hand, I'm thinking to myself, there's no way Jimmy Butler gives up. Like, he understands his legacy hinges on being able to come up big during the playoffs. That's how he's defined the majority of his career. We've seen it over the last few seasons in his stint in Miami. And I think he would go into all these matchups with that same clear understanding. Having said all that, I think he's done. Like, having heard that part about embracing hooping for a living and that it puts food on your table and how lucky you are, that's the kind of explanation that a man says, you know what, I'm still happy, I'm getting paid, my life is fulfilled whether I win or not, and I don't expect to win. So I think he thinks this team is done. I don't think he thinks he's done. I think this team is done, and I think he might generally believe that they don't have what it takes to get to that next level. So despite what we said in the first segment, if I could change my answer, having heard that audio clip from Jimmy, I might actually change it to think that they might not escape the play-in tournament because they just don't think they have enough.
Jeremy, what do you think?
See, I actually felt the opposite way about that audio clip.
There you
go. To me, look, I think sometimes you have to change your approach in terms of leadership game by game. This is one where Jimmy in the second half put the team on his back. Like, he was getting the line, doing all of the things to try to will them back into it. And ultimately they came up short. In the games where he has struggled personally and the team has played well
Philadelphia.
around them and they've come up short. His leadership style has been more, we struggled tonight. We came out flat. This is, this is unacceptable, but we got to be better, all of those things. In a game like this one, where he personally performed better and did some of the things that you would hope, quote unquote, playoff Jimmy would do, particularly in the second half, he comes out with that sort of mindset of like, hey guys, it's going to be fine. We're going to persevere. It's never been easy for us. And to me, that's almost like letting his teammates off of the pressure that comes with losing that game. And like, look, guys, we're always going to find a way to figure this out. Like you mentioned at the beginning, David, everyone was turning on us at the end of last season. Everyone thought this thing was over. Everybody thought we couldn't do it. Let's just remember what it's all about. So to me, actually, that sound even further emphasized the idea to me that like everything is not as rocky as it might seem. And maybe I look foolish. Maybe, he comes out flat in both playing games and ultimately this team falls apart and that's where it goes. But to me, that sound almost continues to emphasize like, this is a guy who's trying to kind of take that pressure off of his teammates of like, look, guys, yeah, you did sort of let me down on this one, except for Tyler's miraculous shots at the end. But we'll figure it out because we've always figured it out. This group always figures it out, proverbially.
And Nikola Jovic, he stepped up in that game.
Yeah, he did. He was great. And Caleb Martin was very good. Look, it wasn't all Jimmy by himself. My point is more they could have used more from the rest of the team. And I think Jimmy knows that. So this is an example of like, look, guys, it's even though I kind of helped will us back into it, we're going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, we made this point yesterday, but, that Philadelphia loss, it was basically the role players doing enough to get that win and Jimmy Butler not doing enough. And then against the Pacers, it was Jimmy Butler doing enough and the role guys not necessarily stepping up as many as that they needed to. And so you end up getting two really costly losses, which essentially cost you a spot in a guaranteed spot in the playoffs. I hear this and I don't know who this person is. I've never seen or heard from this Jimmy Butler in the 5 years. I've never heard him talk like this. This is not Jimmy Butler. Who is this guy? Jimmy Butler is the guy who says, it don't matter. We're still we're going to win the damn championship anyway. We're still going to be holding that trophy at the end of June. There was no guarantees. There was no braggadocio. There was nothing in this quote. This felt like a very different Jimmy Butler. And I don't know whether or not that means that he's given up. So I made you guys answer the question. I'm going to skirt it. I have no idea what it means. I just know that this is not Jimmy Butler. This is not the Jimmy Butler that I am used to hearing from. This is not the Jimmy Butler that Miami Heat fans are accustomed to hearing from at the end of disappointing losses. The one who's rah-rah, we're going to win it anyway. It doesn't matter. Just wait until the playoffs roll around. We haven't heard that kind of talk from Jimmy Butler, essentially, since he gave the quote to Chris Haynes of Bleacher Report, and then him and the Heat did a nosedive after that. And we haven't really heard much of that. Maybe it's just Jimmy Butler learning his lesson. He's like, you know what? The playoff guarantee didn't exactly work the last time, but I also really don't think that that's how Jimmy Butler thinks. So it raised my antenna. Like it's going off. I don't know what it means. And because I made up the game, I don't have to answer the question. Number 3, can Jimmy Butler still be the best player on a championship team? Jeremy, let's start with you.
He's on fire!
I think in terms of leading a team through this Eastern Conference, I think it's possible. I think that Jimmy, as you saw in different moments, is still able to channel some of the things that allow him to tap into that quote unquote playoff Jimmy. Look, the really interesting thing to see this year is what is the difference between playoff basketball and what we've seen this regular season, because the wide open offense has been really remarkable this season in the NBA. And so if there is that typical things slow down, not as much fast-paced basketball, a little more getting to the line, all of those things that come with really positives for Jimmy Butler's game, then I don't see why the answer is no. On the flip side, look, Jimmy's had on multiple occasions opportunities in what were regular season games, Philadelphia being one of them, to put his fingerprints all over a game. In that case, post up Kyle Lowry and get to the line, get his buckets and help his team get there. And we haven't seen him do that on a really consistent basis night in and night out. What I would also point out is that we all talk about sort of playoff Jimmy from last year and the majesty of that and the magic that he channeled for 3 whole series. It was the first round. And then after that, the team beat the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, Caleb Martin had one of the craziest role player series you've ever seen. And Jimmy basically was what he was during the regular season, which was a really, really, really good Jimmy Butler. I still think that he has a series in him to go be the guy that can will his team to the next round. And I think that being the focal point of a team this deep, yes, he can be that guy. Do I think that if like some other players in the NBA, if you surrounded him with just any pieces, he would get there? No. But when you surround him with a ton of different complementary pieces that can do different things on different nights, I still think that that's possible. Yeah.
David, we'll get your answer on the other side of the break. Also, I've got some historical context that doesn't put Jimmy Butler at 34 years old in the best light, but we'll get to that next after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. It's an authorized ticket marketplace. You can get all of the tickets you're looking for all of your events, whether it's comedy, games, concerts, whatever you're looking for. You find last-minute deals, all in prices, and the view from your seats feature where you know exactly where you're going to be sitting, so there's no worries about getting any kind of obstruction or anything like that. Again, they've got such great deals. You'll find the best prices available for any concert or game that you might be looking for. They've got last-minute deals. They got flash deals. They've got this all in pricing, so you see right away. No fees going to get hidden on there or anything like that. You know exactly what you're paying for. You know exactly what you're going to get. That's what makes Game Time the best place to buy tickets right now. So download the Game Time app today. Get those last-minute tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase, but only if you download the Game Time app. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. David, before I throw to you, you have an option. You can either answer the question, is Jimmy Butler still capable of leading a team to a championship, or you can hear my list.
I'm going to go ahead and answer it first because I think you're just going to.
Because you don't care about my evidence, per usual.
No, I
Let's
do.
go.
I
right.
do care. No, I do care. No, I do care.
No, you
That's
don't.
why I think I do. I think Jeremy's wrong. I think he hasn't been. You're forgetting the key part of the question is championship team. They haven't won a championship with Jimmy as their best player.
Fair.
He's the best player. That's part of the problem is that Jimmy is the best player on this team, and they haven't had enough, and he hasn't been enough to carry them to a championship. So the answer is no. He's not. He cannot be the best player. He can't be, as you said, like you laid out an argument that was kind of refuting your point in the sense that he has a series in him. He has the ability to be really good for a limited amount of time. And I think we've seen that. Like, you know, I think the 2020 bubble was such an aberration for so many different reasons, right? And we saw this version of the finals that made Jimmy kind of create this belief that maybe he could do this consistently. But he didn't do it consistently in the first few series of that same playoff run either. He just happened to be Jordan-esque in the finals as opposed to, you know, the way he was against the Bucks last year or against, I can't remember exactly what series was his best series the year before, but he had it. You know, he's very good for small stints, not consistently enough to bring home a title, which is why they haven't won over the last 4 years.
What I would say to that before Wes, just
Yeah.
real quick, is that is also just from a scoring output. And I think that sometimes we look at it as the impact that's made purely based off of those numbers and carrying your team on the offensive end, where there is so much that Jimmy Butler in particular does as a defensive player for a team that is defensive oriented that has allowed them to get there. So I don't want to poo-poo what he does on that side of the ball that allows them to advance in all of these series just because he wasn't necessarily the go-to guy offensively. Because in that 2020 run, you're right, leading scorers, you had Bam in one series, Goran Dragic in another before it was ultimately Jimmy Butler and then Jimmy again in the finals. So I understand it completely.
The other thing about that 2020 series, and I feel like this is a thing that gets overlooked when we talk about the 2020 playoff run, is that it was 4 years ago.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we just, yeah, he did it. He did it 4 years ago. Let me read you. You
lot of
know the number
basketball
one
since
scorer
then.
in the league? You know who the number one scorer in the league in the regular season that year was?
Tracy McGrady.
It might as well have been. It was James Harden. averaging 34 points a game. You know who was like Russell Westbrook was 8th in the league in scoring that year. Russell Westbrook.
So good.
He was playing for the Houston Rockets. Do we remember that? How many teams has it been since then? So Damian Lillard was 3rd. Bradley Beal was 2nd in the league in scoring that year. I mean, that 4 years ago in basketball is an eternity. Just because you did something 4 years ago does not mean you could do it now. And I would even argue just because you did something last year doesn't mean you could do it now when you start getting to Jimmy Butler's age. And I've always said this about Jimmy Butler. I think he was capable of leading the Heat to a championship. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't know if he's capable of doing it now. And that's not even a cynical thing. I just think that it's fair. The guy's 34. He's going to be 35 next year. This is the list I was teasing before. The oldest players to be one of the best 1, 2, maybe 3 guys on a championship team in the last 30, 40 years. Here they are. Tim Duncan was 37 years old for the 2014 Spurs, and he was not the best player on that team, but he was one of them.
No, he wasn't.
Kareem at 37 years old for the 1985 Lakers. I'm not counting the late 80s Lakers because by then Kareem really wasn't one of the top 2 or 3 guys anymore. But Kareem in 85, 37 years old. That was one. LeBron that year at 35 years old with the 2020 Lakers. Okay.
Oh.
Jordan, the 98 Bulls, he was 34. Shaquille O'Neal for the 2006 Heat was 33. And Steph was 33 for the 2022 Warriors. Jimmy Butler's 34. He's going to be 35 by the start of next season. It's not impossible. That the list shows it's not impossible, but those are all-time greats. And as great as Jimmy Butler is, he's not on the list with Shaq, LeBron, Jordan, Steph, Kareem. Like, he ain't that. You know what I mean? And a lot of those guys, by the way, are centers too, who just because of their size and because they're so big, they just have a little bit more longevity. In terms of wings, it's LeBron and it's Jordan. Like, that's it.
I guess this is where you're looking back, and that's kind of the point that I was hoping to make before on depth, right? And the other options offensively. Because what you'll need in order to make that run is you're going to need all of these other options to help carry the load offensively. Tyler and Terry and Duncan needs to be Duncan Robinson. We've seen all year until he's come back from this injury. And Bam Adebayo can't be, 12 points and 16 rebounds. He has to be 18 points. You need more from the rest of this group if Jimmy's going to be the lead guy. Do I expect Jimmy to average 32 points a game to lead the Heat to the finals? No. And I don't think he would expect that either. I think he just views himself as, I could do it for a series to get us to whatever next round, whichever series that we need it. And I could be the tone setter for the rest of those, whether that's on the defensive end, whether that's setting up these other guys. That's at least the model that can get you there.
I would argue the same thing here. I would say, okay, if you beat the Sixers in the 7-8 game and you end up playing the Bucks, I think the Bucks last year were better than the Bucks this year.
Way better.
I don't think you need that version of Jimmy Butler last year. I don't think you need that this time. I think the Bucks are wobbly. I think you could punch them a couple times and you could take them down. And if the standings hold, we're talking about
Orlando
being on, Orlando or Indiana in a 7-game series. I know they just lost to the Pacers, but in a 7-game series, it's very different. I would pick the Heat probably in that kind of series against either one of those teams. Or if it was Cleveland that ended up in that series too, I would still pick Miami over any of those teams. If it's the Knicks, now that's a different story. Are they healthy? All that stuff. It's a whole big wild card with them. But that would be the path. And I don't know that you need that version of Jimmy Butler, like Michael Jordan, Jimmy Butler, triple-double Jimmy Butler. I don't think you need that to win 2 series. You would need him certainly, and then probably then some to beat Boston.
And that's why you get Boston in the first round, finals. Let them waste it all there, and then you make the rest of your run. Come on, guys. Think smarter, not harder.
Next question. What needs to happen for the Heat to make major changes this offseason?
He's on fire!
David, we'll start with you.
I think they're going to make changes regardless.
What if they won the championship?
I think they'd still make changes regardless. I don't think you can stand pat, nor can you continue building off this team. They've reached that point already. And I know I sound somewhat pessimistically in comparison to other episodes, but at the same time, I just think that they've seen what this team is capable. We've seen what this team is capable of already, and so I think they've already reached that point. And there's frustration, obviously, in terms of what they can do during the regular season and just how high the ceiling can be. And so I think, I don't know how big those changes are. I again, is it trading Jimmy? Is it trading Tyler? Is it trading Bam, etc.? I don't know, but I think they're going to try to make whatever significant changes they can over the summer, and I think that's already at that point, regardless of whatever the outcome is.
So by your definition, this is a last dance regardless, but it's Jimmy Butler and he's a country music fan. So is it like the last hoedown? Is that what we're calling this year?
The last hoedown.
The last hoedown.
Yeah, last hoedown. I like it. Yeah.
I would say I would definitely expect the Heat to make some changes, right?
Yeah.
Like, would I be surprised to see them come back with a very similar unit with just a couple of tweaks made? No. Now, would I be surprised if they lose both play-in games and come back with that same team? Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's the main way that I would see them ultimately. That's the main way that I would ultimately see them be able to make like wholesale changes, or even maybe a first round to exit. But to me, look, if you make a deep run again, and you're looking at the same core going to the Eastern Conference Finals 4 out of 5 years and the NBA Finals 2 or 3 times, like, I'd be shocked to see them blow it up. On the flip side, I do think that, like, in West, we've talked about this, either Terry Rozier or Tyler Hero, it'd be surprising to see both of them back in a Heat uniform next year, where either one of them could theoretically be flipped to fill some other holes, particularly as you likely have Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith enter free agency. I can't imagine you're bringing both of them back at that role. Yeah. Kevin Love is another year older. So to me, do I expect this to be the exact same look next year? No, but I do think it sort of depends on what the ending looks like. If it's going out in flames, losing both play-in games, then yeah, you could see a lot of changes.
Is trading Tyler or Terry, does that constitute a major sweeping change?
Good question.
It depends on which one of them, right? Because it is trading a starter, a theoretical starter, in either one of them, because that was the initial plan. Trading Tyler is more of wholesale changes than I think trading Terry is, and that he's just been around longer. And I think trading Jimmy is obviously like massive. Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the whole blueprint.
I think if this team doesn't make the playoffs, nothing would surprise me. The only thing that would surprise me is trading Bam. I'll be even more specific.
I would be absolutely.
That would be the only thing on this roster that would surprise me. Other than that, I think everything would be on the table, and I do mean everything. And I think that might even be the case if they lose in the first round, depending on how that looks. It might even be the case if they lose in the second round, if they make it that far. There's a lot going on. We've talked about the second luxury tax saver and everything like that. I fully expect one of the guys making $19 million plus to be moved, and maybe not for much. Certainly moved with less money coming back, just because this team is in a little bit of cap hell and they need to figure out a way to get out of it. Even if they were to win the championship, that would probably still be the case. There would have to be changes. And Jimmy Butler's set for an extension. What does that mean? We've talked about that enough. Last question here of our 5 burning questions.
He's on fire!
If this is the end of the era, where does it rank among the best eras in franchise history, David?
Yeah, neither of you are qualified to answer this question.
Excuse you.
You weren't even a gleam in your dad's eyes when these eras took place. So at least the eldest.
I was literally alive.
What are you talking about?
At 99?
In the 90s? Well, how old do you think I am? 1999.
I don't know. Either way, you don't really.
I mean, I was 4. I was 4.
Yeah, neither of you are qualified for this. I'm sorry,
but you're going to be wrong if you put that ahead of this.
I'll clear out. Oh no, I'm. Then I'll be wrong, because I think it's already going to be the third best era. Because I think the thing is,
which one is the Jimmy Butler era?
Yeah, Big Three is 1, obviously, and the Zoe Hardaway era is 2. Even though I don't think so. But I think
I'm asking you what you think. So, what do you think?
I think it's the third best era. But I think the general Heat fan will think it's the third. I think it's the second best era. But I think the general Heat fan will think it's the third best era, because there's no erasing what Zoe and Hardaway meant to the fans that experienced that in terms of defining the culture and everything else. Like Pat Riley putting his imprint on a team. Before that, the Heat were like just this negligible, just blob, very amorphous.
Yeah.
They had nothing, and then Pat Riley came in. Yeah, but they had made the playoffs. There were a couple,
the Dan Marley era. Not to overlook that.
No, Dan Marley was during the Zoyer. See, that's why you're not qualified. You don't know what you're talking about. Anyway,
Came
like
before.
the 95, it was Kevin Willis was our center, Ronnie Cycli, Glenn Rice, Steve Smith, guys like that. They were fine players, but they didn't take this team very far until Pat came in 95 and redefined the team and created a culture that exists even today. And so for the people that remember that era and were able to experience it, that will always hold a special place in their hearts.
Okay, but you're one of these people, David. And why do you rank the Jimmy Butler era? Well, you remember
because
it
I
you
know it's
experienced
more
it.
successful because I get to experience.
Well, that's why we're asking
fully.
you and not the general Heat fan. You're the expert. You're the one with the podcast. I
Yeah,
want to know
be
what
the
you
expert.
think. Yeah.
I am the expert because
Okay, so you are the
I've been
one.
in
So
the
I would
locker
love to
room.
hear this. So I think, and I Jeremy, I'm going to imagine that you also have the big three, this Jimmy Butler era, and then probably the Zoe Hardaway late '90s era third. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
guess you also have to not include the Wade
Shaq Wade
Shaq
eras.
era is
Yeah.
kind of insane.
No,
But
that's up there.
shows
we
too.
can
so
have that
short, though.
discussion
It was
in a
so
second.
short. It's basically a 3-year window, which isn't that
Uh-huh.
short if you think about
This
it.
is
If
5
The big
years.
three was 4 years.
Yeah, and that was 4 years, so it's not
but-
that crazy.
I want to know, as
you're
somebody
right,
that
you're
lived
right.
through it, David, like if you've got the Jimmy Butler era over this, where would you have the Shaq Wade era? Would you have that over the 90s? Because that one at least came away with a championship.
Yeah, to me, again, that feels like it was. I lived through all these different eras, but I still think it felt like it was so short. There was a disappointment of 2005, and with Dwayne's injury and not being able to get to the finals, they would have beat the Spurs had they been able to advance to the finals had Dwayne been healthy, and it
No
just
question.
didn't work out that way. The excitement of adding Shaq and everything else, that was great. But the way he flamed out, the way he burned bridges on his way out, the big cactus era and everything else, and then the wasting of a couple of seasons of Dwayne's prime, that was a really crappy exclamation point at the end of a punctuation mark at the end of that statement era. So to me, that one's kind of third, maybe even fourth best in Miami Heat history. As far as this one is concerned, I mean, being in the locker room and seeing everything they've accomplished and the immensity of the pandemic and the bubble and everything else that came with it, and seeing Jimmy's incredible heroics up close and covering this team, to me, makes it much more special. And the fact that they are so hard to define because they're such a different team during the regular season, and then they flip the switch, which is so improbable and unlikely, and that's what makes this team special. I think historically you should be able to look back on this era if and when it blows up this summer and say, man, that Heat team was a real tough team to deal with, and you knew they were going to come in and kick you right in the balls and punch you in the face, and there was nothing you could do about it. And that's what makes this version of the team so exciting, as opposed to even like the big three, which was built to be that good. And yes, they flipped that switch, but that was kind of by design, right? Because they had the three best players, or three of the top 10 players on the planet. So that's what makes the big three era so special. That's what makes this era, I think, the second best in Heat history.
Where do you have it stacked? We have four eras that we're talking about, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, to me, so let me say first, in that Wade Shaq era, I think it's important to note, that's the defining, in some ways, championship of Dwayne Wade's career that separates him from being a guy that rode LeBron's coattails to a lot of people nationally, right? Yeah. Dwayne Wade doing that in his third season with Shaq, who was obviously still Shaq, but wasn't the Shaq of 2001 at that point, right? And being the lead guy on a championship team, and it's your franchise players defining individual moment. So I think even if it's just a 3-year window that you're looking at, you've got to be able to stack that up there. And ironically for me, and this does show my age, I have that third behind this as second. And that's not to say that the Zoe Hardaway years didn't matter in a huge way. Obviously they did. That's building this culture that all of these teams have since modeled themselves after. But in terms of pure success, I mean, Riley says it himself, right? There's winning and there's misery. And so you have to take the teams that went to the finals. You have to take the teams that have won the finals. And so for me, I look at this, obviously the big three era is the number one era in Heat history.
No question.
And it's going to be hard to not remain the number one. The same way the Showtime Lakers are still the best era in Lakers history. It's going to be difficult to not have that be the best era forever. The thing about this era that makes it so special, this duo of Jimmy and Bam over 4 years, if you're not looking at this year yet, has the most playoff wins of any team in their conference. During this stretch, forget about how they finished in the regular season. This has been the most dominant team in their conference for 4 straight years. in the same way that the Big Three era was, which is insane to say. Absolutely insane that when you brought Jimmy Butler here from the 76ers, that you could have ever imagined that the following 4 years you would have been the most dominant team in the playoffs in your conference.
And
Like,
one
considering
more, been to more finals. I know LeBron won one, but you think about the star wings that moved teams in 2019, Kawhi to the Clippers, LeBron to the Lakers, Paul George obviously also to the Clippers, and then Jimmy Butler to Miami.
right.
Butler's had more playoff success in terms of wins. Now, if you want to just say LeBron won the championship, so that, like, I wouldn't argue against it, but it's nobody would have thought Jimmy Butler would have been like neck and neck with LeBron at worst.
Exactly. And so the idea that he's done that individually and this team in so many ways has personified quote unquote Heat culture, and it solidified Eric Spoelstra. And so in the same way that first run that I was talking about for Dwayne Wade with Shaq sort of solidifies him as individual player, his greatness, the way that he gets his own championship separate from the Big Three era. This is the group that has solidified Eric Spoelstra as one of the greatest coaches of all time in the eyes of so many in the national media. And so to have this team with this player and this collection of players have as much success as it did in the eyes of what it's been. Now, it's yet to be seen how it all comes to an end. Is it one more magical run here? Is it another magical run that allows you to ultimately extend it an extra year or two too long? Maybe. But for any of the people who have argued like, well, it's already gone on too long, it could not be more wrong. Like, they could not be more wrong.
You couldn't blow it up after last year. After they went to the finals last year. Now, had they lost to the Bulls, not made that fourth quarter comeback, then yeah,
totally
maybe you could have
separate
blown
conversation.
Up. But you owed it to this team to bring it back. And by the way, they did try to trade for Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
It was not as if
they
the whole
tried
plan
to make
was
moves.
and then when that didn't happen, like then that was it. You just, all right, let's run this thing back. And then by the way, they still made a big-ish trade for Terry Rozier at the deadline. So
that's exactly right.
Look, I agree with everything you said. Another thing here is if they do end up making the playoffs, it's going to be 5 years in a row of making the playoffs. That's going to be second behind those 90s Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway teams. Those teams, that group went 6 straight years to the playoffs. So the Heat have done that one other time with Wade before Wade going into the Big Three era. But then this one would be 5 if the Heat were to make the playoffs this year, which is pretty staggering, considering the short history of this team. And it kind of speaks to the success. And you mentioned just the playoff wins and the dominance, too, that this team has had. If this is the end of the Jimmy Butler era, whatever happens in these playoffs, I think that their legacy is going to be, boy, were they just some MFers that screwed up the whole league for 5 years. Like 4 or 5 years. Like they
messed
really
everything up. They messed everything up for all these guys who were anointed as the next great player in the NBA, too.
They halted the ascension of Giannis as the best player in the league. Giannis was the best player in the league after the 2021 finals, and then that was it. It was by the next playoffs, that was done. So they halted that and made room for the guy that wasn't in their conference, Nikola Jokic, to become that player, and Jokic rightfully deserves that title right now. They were just in the way of the Boston Celtics endlessly, and maybe that stops this year. Maybe it doesn't. We'll see. But they just screwed up a whole bunch of stuff, right? You could even say Jimmy Butler leaving Philly and Joel Embiid on an island might have screwed up his whole career too, depending on what happens with Embiid in the rest of his career. So,
ironically, this is what they say about Michael Jordan during the 90s, when he stopped Reggie Miller, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Sean Kemp, Karl Malone, like all these historically great Hall of Fame players. It was Jordan who was standing in their way, and it's in terms of.
But they did it without winning a championship, which is arguably harder.
Yeah, it's so weird.
So are the Heat better than the 90 Bulls? Like, is
next on First Take. You know,
next on First Take. Why Jimmy Butler did something Michael Jordan never did. Did everything he did without winning a ring. No, I've got this. I've actually got the Jimmy Butler era as third. I've got Big Three. Wow. I've got Dwayne Wade and Shaq as number 2. Just give me the championships. That's what we're here for. And if Jimmy Butler never wins one, it's going to be third. But boy, that's a real good top 3. No offense to Zoe and Tim Hardaway, but like, win a ring and come back to me. Like, and they did it against plumbers.
Put their rings in a box. Put their rings in a box. Show it to me, buddy.
Very good. All right. It's a great top 3 era. Either way, we'll see how it all plays out. Jeremy, thanks as always for joining the show. You know you're one of our favorites to talk to around here. We really appreciate it. You could catch him at Bally Sports. He's doing the Marlins stuff now too. Coming up after the Heat season, obviously on the Dan Batard show with Stugotz. Thanks, man. It was fun times.
Thank you guys. And let me just say, if the Heat get into a series, I trust them in 7 games over just about anybody.
Right, now you're starting to sound like David.
Yeah, I know.
You're starting to sound what David used to sound like before the Pacers lost. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your podcast app.